Good morning, everybody. I'm David Jerome with the Chamber, and today we're hosting a Shared Value Initiative Roundtable on with a focus on utilities. And I have some wonderful guests today. I have Kelly Tomlin, the CEO of the electric company. I've got Lisa Rosendorf from the Water Authority, and I also have Elizabeth Hara from the Texas Gas Service. And one of the reasons we wanted to get together today, obviously underneath shared values, let me just sort of set the table on shared value again for those that are new to the idea. It's a group within the chamber where we want to try to work with businesses in the communities to come together and discuss how we create value together. So, especially economic value creation. And so this tends to focus in on three areas of our businesses. Obviously, rethinking products. And that's a lot of what we're here to discuss today. I mean, what's happening with the utilities as a product and what assistance is out there and things. There's a little bit of discussion, and COVID has pushed us to think this way too a bit. It has certainly affected the thinking, but also how do we redefine productivity in our value chains? What does that mean? And then finally, how do we improve our local sort of environment, our operating environment in terms of reskilling, upskilling, regulations? Do we have the right ones? Do they need to change? And the institutions, are they strong and ready to help us think on a shared value basis as well? So that tends to be the focus of the activity, generally speaking. And I'm very happy to say it has been advancing well. And we're working well with the city and the county and others on this thinking. And moving, I think, primarily from add-on in business to really how we make some strategic decisions as well. So a lot happening in this space. And it was in that spirit that we came together, I think maybe a couple of weeks ago, and we were aware that El Paso had been faring rather well with the storm that had affected all of Texas. And we were also, though, aware that it was affecting some of the product offerings and how we were being perceived at the city council and other things. So it seemed like a good time to sit down as a group and talk about where we are on connecting, disconnecting, assistance for utilities, how we're perceiving all of this. And I will make one note because Liz told me I should, and I think she's right. Is that one of the reasons why all our utilities in El Paso function so well is we have a unique situation in El Paso. We have all ladies running. And so at least on this call. So I think we're in a great space. Today should be very interesting and I hope edifying for everybody. To some extent, I think this is an opportunity for us to make sure we get the facts out so people can make informed decisions on how they think about things. Now, I will be quiet at this point and turn the mic over to, I think first was Lisa. And maybe, Lisa, do you want to make a couple of comments and, sort of share from the water company's perspective what you're thinking in terms of utilities just generally?
Sure. Are you looking for just opening comments or getting into the subject matter of the day?
I think I would jump right into the subject matter if I could be so bold to suggest. I mean, if you want to make some opening comments, certainly do feel free.
No, that's fine.
I think I'd like to give each one of you, if it sort of helps, about 10 minutes each, so you can have a chance to, really set the table, as it were, and then we'll have some questions, I'm sure. But so please.
Sure. Thank you, David. Thank you for organizing this. We really appreciate it. I think it's important for the community to understand opportunities and where we are in terms of facing the pandemic recovery and to know what options they have in terms of assistance. Let me just start by saying I can't believe we're a year in now on this pandemic, and it's been hard for everybody. Right now, we have still about 20,000 customers who are way behind on their bills. And we had suspended disconnections really about a year ago. And we are in the process of resuming our normal collections process. And that is going to be some disconnections. We're doing it very, very selectively. And if anybody has made a payment plan or any kind of a payment in the course of this past year, there's going to be flexibility there, and we're not going to be disconnecting right away by any means. But we have had impacts on the utility in terms of our own revenues, and so I think we are looking to try to take a step back to normal. But at the same time, there are opportunities in terms of assistance for customers, and it's important for our customers to know what those options are. Through the CARES Act, we were able to get $500,000 last year, which all went to helping customers. Right now, Project Amistad, Project Bravo, the county, they have resources to help qualifying customers. There's also a new program called Texas Rent Relief. That's a statewide program that helps with both rent and utility assistance. For all of these, there are income qualifications, and many of them require bills to be overdue. So customers need to look into the specifics of each program. And there's also more money coming. There's actually a program that Congress approved in the last stimulus round for about $638 million in water and wastewater assistance for customers. And that is still at the federal level. It hasn't yet been rolled out to states, and we don't know whether that's going to come directly to us or to our nonprofit partners. But stay tuned on that one. And the new stimulus bill, obviously, is making its way through Congress. It passed the House. Senate is going to be taking that up this week, and we're only starting to understand exactly what's in that, but I fully expect there to be more assistance there as well. And the last thing I'll just make a comment on has to do with the water resilience in the aftermath of the storms. And while the rest of Texas really was hit hard by both power outages, boil water notices, water outages, I think that we learned our hard lesson after 2011. And we at the water utility made about $40 million in investments in resilience, and much of that paid off. We had more than 70 backup generators that we installed at various lift stations and pump stations and our facilities. And we also put insulation in. We put covers on equipment, did enclosures on facilities where pipes had been exposed. So I think the lessons learned of 2011, we took to heart. We made a number of investments. I know the other utilities did too. And so with that, I will hand it back to you, David.
Well, thank you, Lisa. I think it's interesting. I'm already getting one question, and I'll just plant it for all of you to consider as we sort of continue. Is why disconnect now? And I think part of the answer is already in terms of the assistance available, and it's just a bit of a thought, I think, for us to maybe raise again, just to be clear about that. But I think it's very interesting to hear how the water company's doing, and obviously I think we've been very blessed in our community to not have anywhere near the hiccups of, I think, what is it, half the state is still under boil requirements now, so
not quite that much, but there are still a number of utilities that still have boil water alerts.
Yeah, it's pretty large. So anyway, we really do appreciate all that you do in that space. Speaking of somebody that we appreciate, let me also then use that as a sort of segue, if I may, to Kelly and the electric company. Also showing so well during this crisis vis-a-vis our, let's say, competitive cities in Texas, and we're very fortunate for everything that you do. But we also want to hear how El Paso Electric is doing right from the source. So Kelly, right to you, please.
Certainly, and I'll start out with probably the question you just asked, is this question about why resume disconnects. And I'll go over it sort of qualitatively, then I'll have you bring up some slides. But before we do that, I just want to point out that we're managing a number of different concerns. The first one is really bringing forth our compassion for our community, this idea of helping our neighbors. We really want to do that. So we have that real goal and objective. The other objective is, however, our mandate not to discriminate against customers. We do see equally situated people, some really working to pay their bills and others not. And the third thing we have to manage is the need for infrastructure investment. We are in this position now of really just transforming how we do things. I just came back from a drone exhibition where we're showing how we can do things more efficiently with drones. We are adding smart grid to our system. And to maintain a reliability, we have to continue investment. So that puts pressure on us when we look at the economic impact. And today, I think we are at significant arrears. For instance, we have today $18 million in arrears, meaning people that are behind. So that puts a great pressure. So we're trying to manage all of that. And I just want to go through the timeline. If you could bring it up, Ale or the chamber, whoever had it, because there's lots of numbers, lots of dates. And I just thought it'd be easier to read if we just brought up the slides. Ale, are you doing that, or the chamber? So there's, like I said, lots of numbers, but I want to put into perspective, and I wasn't here, and I just want to congratulate the team that was. We have been recognized for how we responded to the pandemic throughout the industry, not just throughout Texas, but throughout the industry. And so just to put in perspective, we voluntarily quit suspending people. We stopped disconnections on March 16th when it became apparent we were in a pandemic. On the 26th, then the PUCT then issued a moratorium. But what happened after that is they eliminated that moratorium on the 31st. And it's really critical to note this because I have met with the PUCT. Well, I did meet with the PUCT chairman, the one who resigned yesterday. And her comment was to me, Kelly, we're going to have no sympathy for your many millions of dollars of bad debt, your $1 million of arrears, because we have discontinued the moratorium. People have funding and you should be disconnecting. Well, that doesn't sound very compassionate, but that was our regulator saying you can't discriminate. Some people aren't paying, some people are paying. There is funding, so you have to resume that. We did not resume that. We started communicating with customers on the 15th because we knew funding was available and we knew funding was coming. And that's really the answer to your question. I think Lisa said it too, that we recognize that there is funding. We heard stories from agencies that while people were getting funding, they weren't using it to pay their electric bill. So we started communicating. On February 1st is when we started disconnecting. I want to emphasize what Lisa said. We're just asking for you to call us. We're asking you for do a payment arrangement. We're being very, very broad on that. And I'm so proud of Joe, who's on, I know listening, if I can't answer it, I know Joe will. We've given our agents the right to work with our customers without asking us to give funding. So there's a lot of funding available, and we've only disconnected 1,200 people. We've reconnected 906. So 81% of people have been reconnected. And I think all of our utilities know what usually happens is that they get some other name or they do something to get energy. But we're happy that we're seeing this reconnect rate at a very high rate. And here's what, unfortunately, utilities have trained their customers to do. And it's unfortunate, but we have trained in this way. Some customers do not pay until you disconnect them. It's just, they just know that. We see it in the winter. And what happens, David, is they get a bill that's so overwhelming by that point. And after a year, this bill looks pretty overwhelming for people. But we are trying to be very targeted. We are asking just simply to call us. And the next slide, I think, really digs into the numbers of support we've been able to achieve. We've helped 52,000 customers. We've totaled about $7 million. Look at all the agencies standing out there ready to help. Project Bravo, General Assistance, Project Homicide, Texas Rent Relief, as you mentioned, Lisa, the Department of Housing and Community Affairs. There's lots of funding available. And we're really, really proud of the Bright Hearts Fund that we've been able to contribute to as well. So they've given us money and we've matched that. And we have a lot of funding available for that. And so far, at the end of February, we've helped more than 500 people, $76,000. And then we match, of course, so we match half. So there's a lot of funding. I mentioned before, David, we were talking that even a police officer came over and gave $1,000, and the executive group was able to match that. And then the company matched that. So what we're trying to do is get the people who need support with the support. And I think that's our challenge right now. And you've asked me just to go into a little bit, real briefly, on what happened. Before I do that, Joe, is there anything we need to point out that I did not point out? Because you do this every day.
No, you covered it. It is really about getting the customers to talk to us. If you'll talk to us, we'll work with you.
And I think that's a message all of you can help us get out. So we can stop the slide, but I just want to point out that a utility, and I just left an EEI meeting with the whole industry. That the EEI was CEOs. That's our board meeting, the CEOs of energy, the utility industry across the U.S. And we had the FERC chairman on, Chairman Glick, and we were talking about infrastructure investment and how we need it. And I think we all recognize, all of us who are involved in economic development, that's really critical that we maintain our roads, our energy system. And we've all admitted that right now we don't have a smart grid. We don't have some of the technology and infrastructure benefits that other companies have. And we are lucky now that we have an investor that we don't have to live quarter by quarter. So we have a longer runway to invest, but you cannot make up investment in a utility company or energy infrastructure company if you don't invest year on year on year. So that's the pressure we're feeling. We were all proud, and I hope you all were proud when we got to see a couple of our folks on CNN. You can't buy that type of advertising. Now, I just want to remind us, it happened for these reasons. That we did, as Lisa said, we did have an event like this where we did have rolling blackouts before, and we dug deep into that, and our teams learned from that. And I can brag on them because I wasn't here. But they did determine that they would not build. And when they built a new power plant, they'd build it on dual fuel. So if gas wasn't available, we would be able to run it on another fuel. That was highly unpopular, highly. So when we said we're adding $7 million to Montana, nobody thought that made sense. And sometimes leadership's not a popularity contest. And we do have people who work with us that help us create the best infrastructure. And that is what saved us. I know the press kept saying, oh, it's because you're not connected to the grid. Well, it wouldn't matter where you're connected if you need gas and you can't get gas. It wouldn't matter if your team hadn't looked at all the lessons learned. And as you said, Lisa, had the heaters available, were prepared when filters failed to do something differently, when something else happened to do something differently. So a team that reviewed lessons learned and prepared, and then in addition to that, had gone against public sentiment and built a power plant that was able to do dual fuel. Have we ever needed that? No, but you know what? We saved $19 million that we will not have to pass on to our customers because we made that decision. So I think while it seems unrelated, it's very related. You need a robust company, a utility that can make the investments for long-term economic development, sustainability. And I think we can balance those shared values, David, where we are compassionate and connected, and we do everything we can to help those in need. And we work really hard to match those that have funding with those who need it. But at the same time, holding a sense of accountability that come talk to us. We're asking you just to talk to us and we can't discriminate against the people who do come and talk to us and who pay their bills and not hold the same accountability for those who don't. So I think we can walk that line, and I'm proud of my team, and I know my customer service team is on. I know it's not fun, and they've been able to do it, and they're so thrilled that we've been able to now do a couple things. So we are helping with disconnects. We are extending the hours of operation to 7 p.m. We're having a chat now where you don't really have to talk to us. You can chat with us. We'll have kiosks out in the community. So we're making it easier for you to pay your bill and for you to talk to El Paso Electric. So that's a mouthful, a lot of numbers, but again and again, we can do compassion with accountability.
I think it was delightful. Thank you, Kelly. And listen, I mean, facts are facts, and numbers help portray that. And it's very good that, I mean, part of this effort is to make sure that we get the facts in front of people so they can make informed decisions themselves. And in that spirit, obviously, I think the last panelist I'd like to call on today is Liz O'Hare. And I've gotten to know Liz over the years, and just terrific at Texas Gas Service. What a great management team. The CEO has been here. He's a delight and very committed to this community as well. You guys have done some amazing things, but gas and everywhere else but El Paso, it seems, had a rough go in Texas. Do you mind jumping in and sharing some points of view on what you think is happening there? And then also in terms of your disconnect and connect issues as well, Liz. Thank you. You're muted, I think.
Can you hear me now?
We got you. Loud and clear.
All right, great. I'll go ahead and start with disconnects. Texas Gas Service has not resumed our disconnections here in El Paso. Like the other utilities, it was early to mid-March of last year, as the pandemic was really starting to kick in, the Texas Gas Service decided not to do the disconnections, and we haven't resumed them since. Now, that's not to say that it doesn't give us some anxiety. We're certainly aware of where we are in arrears. But in just the way that this pandemic rolled out in a calendar year, that really had more to do with why we haven't done as many disconnections, although there is certainly the compassionate piece. But if we started to look at what we were talking about as we were looking at, August, September, should we begin to resume this? Now, you have to remember, David, and you and I have talked about this, each one of these utilities is regulated differently. We all have a different higher organization. So for electric, it's the PUC, for water, it's the PSC, and for us, it's the Railroad Commission. And so when the Railroad Commission said, you guys can go ahead and start disconnections, we were looking at that in September, October, and we normally do not do disconnections in the winter time. And so for us, we just continued to go ahead and roll through what our normal operations were at that point. As you now see, we still have cold weather in February. Now would not be an ideal time for us to necessarily kick that off. These conversations, though, are certainly ongoing within the utility for all of the same reasons that Kelly just talked about. You have to balance what you need to do to be compassionate in your community against how do you serve your ratepayers, our customers, and what does that look like? So that's a conversation that's still ongoing, but as of today, still no disconnections, but we continue to put out, just like El Paso Water and El Paso Electric, all of the information about the organizations that are out there, either because there was CARES funding that came through the city of El Paso. We saw the utility assistance that was coming through. We have our own Share the Warmth program. So people who needed assistance can also do that. But we cannot stress enough, just like Lisa and Kelly, we need to hear from our customers. So a lot of them have called and have said, I can't necessarily pay my full bill, but can I get on a payment plan? Absolutely. And so we've really been very generous in being able to work with our customers and help them through whatever situation they were going through. So I think that those are still very important, and we continue to push out that messaging. Insofar as how natural gas was working in the state of Texas, it was a little hard, to be perfectly honest, to be sitting in El Paso and knowing we had water, we had electric, we had gas, and the rest of the state was suffering. It was a little hard to have an atta-girl kind of moment when you knew there were people that were cold. And so for us, we also oversee gas in the Central Texas area. So primarily, we're going to be in the Rio Grande Valley, parts of North Texas, Central Texas. What worked really well for Texas Gas Service in Austin was the communication that we were having with Austin Energy as well as Austin Water. And I think that this was an example for people of just how the utilities, very few of them are actually independent. If you want hot water, you're talking about water and natural gas. If you're running your furnace, you're talking about electricity and natural gas. They're going to go together. And so for that reason, when ERCOT started to tell Austin Energy, hey, we're going to need you to, start these rolling brownouts. And at that time, it looked like they were going to be 45 minutes to an hour and a half long. We were having conversation with them, because what happens is that when people get their electricity back on, the furnace flips on at the exact same time. So not only are you drawing on an electric grid, but you're pulling gas. We wanted to be in lockstep with our utility partners so that as they were bringing on communities, we could be there and make sure that they didn't pull so hard on the gas supply that we were now knocking out gas in various homes. So in Austin, Texas, I believe we lost, for natural gas, we lost about 300 homes, and it was for about a day. I don't even think it was a full day. And so considering the number of customers that we have there in Central Texas, that was pretty good. And honestly, that happened. That's what kicked it off for us, is that as people were getting their electricity back, it knocked out gas. And so we said, hey, can we work with you guys? As you're starting to pull communities back on, can we be with you? We made sure that we had ample gas supply in those areas. We were increasing patrols to make sure that there were not going to be any issues. And same thing with Austin Water. Because their lines go in the same right-of-way as our lines, as water can expand, sometimes they can break lines. As you're trying to adjust on that, sometimes our lines can get in the way. So we wanted to make sure that we were working with Austin Water and saying, can we be on site with you so that as you're working, if something happens, we can jump on it right away. And we were able to do that very successfully. So I think that that was really important. But going back to the 2011 freeze that we had in that February, you know, even back then, Texas Gas Service, they lost in El Paso fewer than 1,000 homes during that freeze. And that sounds like a really good number, unless you're one of those 1,000 homes, right? And then you remember the February freeze in a completely different way. And so Texas Gas Service, like our other utilities, has always invested in the infrastructure and made sure that, you know, our pipeline is going to be safe, that we are working alongside our utilities. And I think that you really saw the benefit of that. You know, somebody a friend of mine kind of teasingly said, you know, everybody hates to, you know, see their bills, but they sure like when their heat is working or when their electricity turns on. And there's something to be said about the investment in that. It's kind of like what Kelly said. You have to invest for the future as well as for the here and now, but you can't get lost in the pressure sometimes to push off. You know, it's kind of that I'll gladly pay you tomorrow for a hamburger today. It doesn't work like that. You have to invest for today and tomorrow. I think all three utilities here in El Paso did a fantastic job doing just that.
Yes, and you know, I think that's terrific. And a big part of the shared value is not just to be responsive clearly to short-termism. You want to be thinking long-term in terms of how we create economic value in our community. And I'm getting a bunch of questions, and there's some really good, it sort of looks like it's going around two themes. One of them I would sort of capture in this way is it makes no sense, obviously, for you to, as a great person just said to me recently, makes no sense for you to be, you know, allowing people not to pay when there is assistance out there for them. But I think there's sort of a disconnect maybe, or just to be pun intended, I suppose, on how we think about this, because I don't think you can get the assistance unless you have a disconnect order. Is that correct? Is that true for all of you?
I don't think so, Dave, at all. I think it's just you have to be in arrears. And that's what I was so excited about, that we gave the power to our CSRs who not had that power to really manage some assistance. And I pointed out that we really had 19,000 people who are eligible for disconnects. We're only disconnecting the highest, the people who have the highest arrears, hopeful that once it's sometimes, as I think Joe and Eddie always tell me, it's just seeing a car drive by, sometimes it'll prompt them just to call us. So they don't have to have a disconnect, but they do have to have arrears. Joe, is there anything else they have to be able to get funding?
Hang on, just getting things going here. So pre-pandemic, they would have needed a disconnect. Once the pandemic hit, that requirement went away. So pre-pandemic, yes, you would have had to go to an assistance agency and, oh, I'm in dire straits. But once the pandemic hit, no, it is all about, hey, if you have a problem, if you know in need, go see an assistance agency and they'll take care of you.
That's excellent to know. Is this true for the water authority and the gas authorities as well? I mean, do you need do you just need to be in arrears, or do you actually need a disconnect notice to get the benefits?
Just arrears for water.
Yeah.
Same here.
Yeah, so there really is no excuse then. And if somebody does call, I'm sure they can get assistance. What I'm hearing from all of you is each one of you are saying, please give us a call and we'll make sure we get you some assistance. That's pretty direct and pretty clear. And I think it's part of this video is I'd like to make sure that's one clear takeaway for anybody who's watching it, whether they be a public policy or elected official or somebody who's in need. Call whoever you're having trouble paying, and they will help you.
Hey, this is fascinating to me. Fascinating. We have funding, and we can't get people to call. I can't wrap my head around this. We have funding. Please call us. I think that's the message we want to hear. And people are being so generous. So please, we want to help. Just let us help. And I think that's the message I think all of us want to, for our communities to hear, that we want to help.
Okay,
give us a call. Yeah.
Exactly. That's message number one. Number two, which strikes me as extremely important maybe to put a fine point as well on, so it's quite explicit, because I think it is confusing for people with some of the noise that you hear in the debate around these things, is that we did very well after the 2011 storm by investing in our infrastructure in this space. We just had a storm in 2021, which that investment clearly paid off. We will have another storm eventually. And I think several of you have gone to different government entities asking for an expansion of infrastructure. Is there anything that we need to push or reconsider or double down on in terms of investments that we need to make so that when the next storm hits, we don't have this problem that the rest of Texas did? Because I agree with you, it's not a function of being on the grid of Texas or not. It's about making these investments that are hard to see our way clear on in the short term, but in the long term, make a lot of sense. Maybe just a comment on that is just where you are, and are you going to revisit some of these things or think differently about them, or things of this sort? Just a quick comment in that space. Thank you.
I'll speak up just in terms of water. Well, we were feeling great about our backup power systems, and again, we put a lot of money into those backup power systems. Our lesson learned last week was that we need backup fuel for the backup power systems, because our backup power systems really are designed with the fuel that they have to only run about 24 hours. And that's really about all we needed in the cold this last week. But we were scrambling in terms of fuel sources to refuel our backup power. So that is going to be one of those things that we line up to have those kinds of backup fuel. So I think even last week, we had some near misses perhaps, but I think that we had some good lessons learned, and so we'll be even better prepared next time around.
Wonderful.
David, this is a hot button for me. Definitely, we have to remind ourselves that what ran last week primarily was a 5-year-old power plant. And what also ran was a nuclear plant in Arizona, 6.5 hours away, closer than Dallas. So we have to remember our unique position in the world. So what does that mean? That 60-year-old, that 1957 vintage equipment did not run. And if we had not replaced it against public sentiment, we would have been in the dark like everyone else. So I just want to continue to point out, we need to replace our old and aging infrastructure. We have to. It's irresponsible not to. And we need to replace it with a variety of fuels, because we are going to have different weather events. This summer, when it's hot, we're going to lean on our solar. And next year, when we have 270 more megawatts, we're going to lean on it. We are today working very hard to be ready for summer, which we expect to be very hot. But we need investment in transmission lines to accommodate the new clean energy. We need investments in new technology to make our grid self-healing. We need investments in our generating assets to be able to respond to a variety of weather events. And we, like everybody else, want to protect for climate. But I just got off with the new Department of Energy Secretary, and I love what she is saying. Like, we no longer can solve for one problem, we've got to solve for all of them. We have to remember that the best kilowatt hour spent is the one we don't use. So all of us partner together to be in efficiency, but more than that, to continue to solve for price and reliability. So I think the lesson learned, the one to prepare for going forward, is that this region deserves new infrastructure then that can meet these various climate situations that we're going to face.
And Liz, how about the Texas gas service?
For us, I think it was a lesson in what happens upstream from us. And so we are what's called an LDC. So we are the local distribution company. We take control of the gas from the city gate into the city. And that's how we provide natural gas to businesses, homes, schools, hospitals, what have you. But the issues that you saw in Texas were upstream. So we weren't obviously the only ones that were having cold weather, and it wasn't isolated to Austin, it was across the state. And so in the Permian Basin, when it was starting to get cold and the equipment was starting to have issues, not only was the equipment having issues, but the conditions were such that those suppliers could not put their personnel out into the field to fix the freezing equipment. And that's where you started to see the messaging coming up out about conservation, let's not use as much gas. If we can slow down the demand, it'll give a little bit of time to pass. These guys will be able to get out into the field. They'll be able to fix the equipment. You'll see that. But that's one of the reasons why that plant out in East El Paso luckily has the two fuels, so that as natural gas started to become questionable for El Paso Electric, they could switch to something else. It's a good backup. So I would say that for Texas Gas, and these will be conversations that'll go on for some time, that'll be happening with suppliers to say, okay, what are you guys going to do so that we don't recreate this event? What can you do so that your equipment doesn't freeze? Are there things that could have been done differently with their personnel? So it's with more of a vendor, if you will, for Texas Gas Service, but not our utility itself. I certainly think that a lot of the communication that was underway, again, with all of the different utilities and even with our large users of natural gas, you know, even here in El Paso, we started to reach out to them on February the 14th to say, this is going to be a very bad storm in Texas. We would like for you to start curtailing. So this is going to be for our large industrial users, things like a steel mill out in Vinton, or we have dairy farms that are homogenizing milk here locally, providing milk to schools, Fort Bliss, what have you, local stores. So these are going to be large users. So we didn't tell them shut down. What we said is basically go to plant protection, do what you need to do, but don't use as much as you normally do. David, we didn't get a lot of pushback from people. They completely understood. And it's one of the reasons why El Paso fared as well as it did, because people here in El Paso got the message, they conserved, and it allowed us to continue to have all of the energy that we needed.
You know, if
Well, that's terrific. Oh, sorry, go right ahead.
No,
Please
no,
jump in.
Liz reminded me of something, and I know that we talk about a lot about this internally, is the supply side. We talk, I mean, the demand side. We talk so much, and we are talking primarily about the supply side, but definitely being able to communicate the demand side during events, especially this summer, but really educating about how little changes can make a huge difference. What does the peak look like? Meaning, when are we really stressing our system, and when can you use power more efficiently and effectively? I always point out, I drive an electric car, and in my prior place I lived, I'd get a price signal, and sometimes I would charge it almost for free because the utility had the technology to vary pricing on their meters according to how much it was costing the utility. All kilowatts are not created equally. The kilowatt during our peak is very expensive. The kilowatt hour while you're sleeping from 10 to 6 is not as expensive. So I think all of us getting together and say how we're being partnership. So I think that's number one. The second one that she brought up, I think it's important to note too, in our investment scenarios, is that we did have backup gas. We had gas in storage. So that really helped us while we were getting together our fuel oil. So this idea of having backup and understanding that utilities have to invest in backup, which has been the subject of controversy too. Why you have that gas there, you can get gas on the grid. And I used to work for independent power in Texas, and those utilities did not have backup gas either. So when they all went to the pipeline, they didn't have backup gas. And the final thing that I just want us all to sit here, and I was reminded of it this morning when I mentioned the drone exhibition. We had the police station there, the fire, the airport, UTEP. We have everybody there in partnership. And I think that's something that we don't celebrate enough, is this idea how we came together as a local unit and figured out how to do this together. And all of us alluded to that. But I would point out that we have generation. ERCOT those utilities do not own generation. They can't call anybody. They can't say, can you go replace that? Can you put the heater on? Can you get other gas? They're just sitting there begging, hoping some generation shows up on the grid. So we're really well positioned for that. But more than that, just watching the partnership, we were talking to the gas company, the water company, and when we needed to get that fuel oil and there was a long line of trucks out there, they let us, recognizing the public safety component, let us get to the front of the line. Do you think you could have done that somewhere else to say, hi, can we get some fuel oil? We only have one power plant that can run on it. And all 4 units were running on that fuel oil. But it was where our partnership and our community came together and say, how do we work this out together? And that's just so unique that I think we need to take a moment to celebrate that.
Well, let's do just that. And I will say also, I think you're at a unique point that some of the electeds that may not have been as receptive to some of these messages before the storm are now. And we stand ready to come back and work with you to try to get back in front of them to get some of this work done that needs to be done. The investment has paid off, and we need to keep these investments current so that it continues to. Storms are a nice reminder of what can go wrong. And sometimes we tend to take these things for granted and forget them. And so there's a lot to do, but this is a unique inflection point for us to sit back and go, not only to celebrate how well we work together, because I agree with Kelly, it was terrific to see, but also that we're not done working together. We need to come together and make sure the investments are made to ensure that the next storm, with some of the challenges we have, could be sooner than we hope. And so these investments are pay when we need them the most. And I think your industries and each one of your companies and the people who work at them are to be complimented, because you have to suffer the slings and arrows of both sides of this: customer demand, employee demand, shareholder demands, all these different things that you're trying to do, and work well with our community to try to enhance how we create value together. There's a lot going on, and I think it's to be complimented. It's one of the things I love about the Chamber in terms of this job, is we get to peel the layers back on different industries and different companies and things, and nothing like a well-survived crisis that I don't want us to take the wrong lessons from, which is part of the reason we're doing this, which is we could sit back and just celebrate. We also have to get to work and make sure we can celebrate for the next one too, because of the job we do based on what we just learned. So I'm very pleased about how this has gone, but I have weaved in all the different questions I got throughout this thing as best I could, but I also want to leave a couple of minutes for each one of you. If you just have a couple of thoughts you want to round out before we sign off for today, because I think it's very important we hear from you last. So maybe I can call on each one of you. I'll do it sort of reverse. Liz, do you have a couple of thoughts you'd like to leave?
Yeah, I think that this storm really kind of kicked up again the conversation about renewables, about climate change. In 2020, you didn't hear so much about that because obviously we were dealing with a pandemic. But if you were to remember, back in 2019, climate change was the conversation, and all three of our utilities were starting to have those conversations of how do we get our messaging out about what we're already doing? Because you'll have to remember, David, in 2019, it wasn't like the light bulb went off for the utilities and we all said, gosh, we should probably do something about climate change. We'd all been doing it for probably 10 years, if not longer, but it's probably not done as great a job about messaging that to our different communities. In 2020, that all goes on hold. However, the utilities play a big, important role in what's happening in the pandemic with regards to how they're supporting the communities, either through grants that are happening to the local food banks, through not doing disconnections. They're a good and honest player in their communities. Now it's 2021. We've gone through this storm, and here comes the climate conversation again. So I will tell you that I think that particularly through the Chamber's Shared Values initiative, I think it's going to be a really good opportunity for us to start working on that messaging, making sure that we are having open and honest conversation, not just with the city council, which is part of our regulatory arm, but with Joe citizens. They need to know what Texas Gas Service is doing. They need to know what's available through El Paso Electric, what's happening with El Paso Water. Because again, these are good and honest players. We recognize that we are in a desert, that water is going to be a commodity, that heat is coming. So that's going to be an issue for us. And so I think this is a good opportunity for us to really kind of step up our game and talk not only about what's already underway, but what we're looking at further down the road. And by that, I mean 12 months, 18 months, 24 months from now. These are not long-term, oh, we'll get to it in 2050. Each one of our utilities, has projects underway right now in which they are trying to affect positive change. And I think that 2021 is going to be a really important year for that kind of messaging.
Thank you, Liz. Kelly?
Am I next? Sure. We're running a campaign right now. I hope you've seen. It's basically Get to Know Us Again. and get to know what we're doing. So I would just offer that I've worked at a lot of utilities in my last 30 years, and I have never worked with a group that cares more about their community and their customer. So get to know us again, reach out to us, communicate it with us. We want to serve. So that would be number one. And number two is let's get to know the facts. Liz mentioned climate change. We have strategy. It's called safety in the 5 C's. And one of those 5 C's is climate. We are so committed to ESG. We talk about it every day. The investor invested in us has shareholders that insist on it. I have to report on both ESG and DEI, but get to know the facts. And I just want to share this with anybody who's listening, how we compare. And I always like to make the analogy, it's hard to lose the last 5 pounds. So El Paso Electric, carbon per megawatt hour is 538. In the state of Texas, we're almost half the state of Texas, other utilities. And if you think about the US power sector, it's 953. So we're at 538. I know it's a lot of numbers, but just remember, we're almost half. And in New Mexico, they're 1340, which is right there. So we're 538 pounds per megawatt hour. They're 13. So I just say, number one, get to know us again and give us, I would say, the benefit of the doubts. Number one, two, get to know the facts. We're here. We're trying to be transparent, but we want us to start with what's real. And the third thing is, we have such an opportunity right now. We have been the subject of national press, but more than that, we have an opportunity to show the world how it can be done. We're already ahead in so many things that's going to happen in the future, that we have an opportunity to show how partnership looks like, how people come together and make something special happen, how you don't bicker and argue with everyone who doesn't agree with everything you believe, and how you reach across various aisles and really keep the end goal in mind. And that's a region that is positioned well for growth and prosperity for everybody. So get to know us again, get to know the facts, and don't waste this moment. So that's the 3 thoughts I would like to leave us with.
Outstanding. And by the way, that comment about the last 5 pounds being tough, a little too close to home for me, Kelly. I just leave it at that.
I don't know. I said I've been here 6 months and gained 6 pounds. This is going wrong, man.
COVID's rough, I think, at all. But I'll segue as smoothly as I can away from my diet and move over to Lisa and for final comments from the water company.
Sure, and the diet is actually a good segue to talk about conservation. And so I thought I would just mention that, this spring is the time when people start watering their plants outside and watering their small grass patches and trees and things like that. And that's when the water use surges, and that's when bills surge. So for anybody who is struggling in terms of paying those bills, conservation is really an important tool to keeping the bill down. In fact, we have something called the water supply replacement charge. It's about $12 on the annual bill. And if you keep your water use below, I think it's 3,000 gallons per month, that charge will be waived. So if you're thinking about sustainable spending in terms of water, that's, conservation is really a solution for you. And just the final comment that I would like to offer, and I think we were talking about celebrating our collaboration. The other thing I would like to celebrate is all of the essential workers we have. Utilities across the board. Our teams have worked throughout this pandemic, and during the freeze, we had extra crews on hand working in really cold conditions to make sure that everybody has water, and that the other utilities, their essential workers are doing the same things. And it's just important for us to stop and think about, it just doesn't arrive magically at our house, whether it's electricity, gas, or water. It's because of the work of our essential workers that we can all enjoy those things every day.
Well, on that delightful way to end, I thank you, Lisa. Kelly, thank you. Elizabeth, thank you very much. I think we were able to get some facts out that needed to be stated on connecting and disconnecting and things like assistance for folks who need help. Please, again, let me recap, call whichever authority you need to. If you're having trouble, they are here to help. We will revisit what will make us successful in terms of investments and infrastructure for the next storm. We have to prepare for that now. And I think we're in a good position with this wonderful set of folks that we've been collaborating with, I think throughout this activity, not just the storm, but even in advance. This is something that we knew we needed to do. And I'm very proud of the initiative at the Chamber and the folks like you that make it happen. So thank you. And I will wish you a wonderful day.